Hello, and welcome to Ask an Archaeologist. I'm Paul Duncan McGarrity. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ask an Archaeologist podcast with me, Paul Duncan McGarrity. I'm not going to keep you too long on this one. We are, obviously in unusual times. I hope everyone is keeping well. I hope you're all managing to find things to fill your time. I have a few really interesting interviews coming up, which I hope will provide a distraction to you all. But also, as well as the podcasts, I just wanted to let you know something very quickly. I'm also, I've started producing videos on YouTube. I'm doing a 4-part workshop on how you can do an archaeological study of your own home whilst we're all enjoying them at the moment. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in doing, you can search for it on YouTube. It's called Talking Walls. It's on my own personal channel there. Or there are links available on my Twitter account at AskAnArch and at Paul Duncan McG. What else? Yeah. Not really, it's just I'm hoping everyone's okay. That's the main thing. I know there's people who listen to this all over the world, and it's going to be affecting you all in different ways. Personally, it's made me sort of reassess how I feel my priorities in my life are, what they might be, what the purpose of archaeology is in a society as well, which I think may be themes that we revisit as the year progresses. But for right now, I think it's just a case of keep your heads down, look after each other, tell the people that you love them, and we'll all get through to the other side. So this interview is one that I've actually been looking forward to doing for a very long time. This is Eimear Duffy. She is one of the contributors for the Motherfocloir podcast, which is a podcast that looks at the Irish language, and she is sort of the podcast contributor with regards Irish mythology and literary elements, historical literary elements. And I think it's a really interesting interview. I hope you all enjoy it. I absolutely had a great time with it. Like I say, I've got some really fun ones lined up. If you want to get in contact with me for any reason whatsoever, even if it's just to have a chat about something, I am available. I am happy to talk about absolutely anything, particularly if it's a distraction. And you can do that through at AskAnArch or at Paul Duncan McG. And I can just about hear my new baby son having a little cry in the background, which kind of tells me that, everything's going to be okay. Enjoy the interview. I'll see you all another time. Bye. Eimear Duffy, it's lovely to have you on.
It's so good to be on. I'm a bit delighted.
I'll tell you what's more exciting is that we took 20 minutes to make phones work in the 21st century.
It's literally 2020, and it took us 20 minutes to get that sorted.
So how are you doing? How's life treating you?
I'm good. I am up in the air for the time being with coronavirus and the whole lot, so I'm at home. My mammy's looking after me for a while,
that's
and
lovely.
So I've turned the spare room into an office, and I'm tipping away.
Yeah, well, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, I'll do a quick introduction and then I'll get you to do it again properly.
Happy days. I hope no one knows who I am.
Yes. So this is Eimear Duffy, the medievalist with the mostess. She is one of the contributors to the Motherfocloir podcast.
Yes.
and I let me try that one more time because I've been practicing that all afternoon.
Right.
Motherfocloir.
No.
Motherfocloir.
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 Yes.
Brilliant. I mean,
Yes.
I'm so glad that I spent genuinely hours just repeating the introduction to the podcast over and over again so that when I finally get to say it, I entirely stuff it.
Yeah, and it's got like the little Super Mario kind of like Irish national anthem theme tune as well. You keep having to listen to.
Oh yeah. God, I mean, I got very good at doing the 10-second jump back by the end of it. Just like wait, now. Oh, I'm gonna have to listen to the introduction.
Yeah, I remember they played that intro for me first. We just recorded like the first episode. And they were like, oh my god, you have to listen to like our intro is so cool, and they played it for me, and I just kind of like took the earphones off and just walked away, and I was like, no, like we can't be associated with that. And they've kept it like series 3, and it still feels like Super Mario is going to come out like with the Irish flag and start dancing, and I'm like, please stop.
That's 2 stereotypes for 1.
It is. There's an entire like Italian-Irish community that are just gonna like excommunicate me now. I'm done.
Yeah, they're just hiding under the. So we've apart from eviscerating the introductory theme tune, I think I'll leave it to yourself to describe what it is that the podcast is about.
Yes, so Motherfocloir, as we say in the intro, it's a podcast about words, Irish words, and words from Ireland. So it's off the back of the book written by Darach O'Shea, and he has the Twitter account at the Irish 4.
He's the lovely voiced one.
He's the lovely voiced one.
Oh. I mean, you can't see me, but I am blushing every time I listen to that voice.
I'll tell him you said that. But so he started off with the Twitter account at the Irish 4. And obviously that built up a following. It built up kind of an online personality. And off the back of the Twitter account, he got the book deal. And off the back of the book deal, he got the podcast. Right. So way back yonder, I was doing my undergraduate degree in Maynooth University, and I was doing medieval Irish and Celtic studies and Spanish. Mm-hmm. And it was in and around the time when Darach was writing the book, and he was doing a bit on Ogham Stones and early Irish. So he just DM'd me on Twitter, and he was like, I just want 1 or 2 references and sources to use in the book. So we got talking anyway, and next thing, when the podcast came up, he was like, look, Eimear, I'd love if you came in and just did, 1 or 2 episodes. And I was like, grand, 1 or 2 episodes, that's fine. And now it's series 3.
Yeah. On your Twitter bio, which, by the way, if anyone isn't following her, Eimear, on Twitter already, please do. It is a joy. It is. Oh, I think a Serbic would be probably underplaying how fantastic it is.
Oh God. No pressure.
Yeah, no, it's good fun. I enjoy it. But you put in your bio that you are a pop culture archaeologist. Mm-hmm. What do you understand to mean by that?
Kind of because I love Paris Hilton.
Are you trying to reconstruct her life through her material culture? Just lots of spangly dresses.
Just a bit, yeah. Kind of, I like the popular kind of bits that would appear from, let's say, the early Irish myths and sagas, but also I really, really love early noughties celeb culture. So I was like, how am I going to like amalgamate the two here, put them into one, and just pop culture archaeologist popped into my head. So I was like, there we go. And I wouldn't mind. Excellent. I'm not even an archaeologist. I think I did 1 module in archaeology in like the first year of my undergrad, and after that I was like, nah, screw it, the literatures class. So I'm no way qualified to call myself any sort of an archaeologist.
But you got an interest in sort of medieval literature, or so what kind of material are you dealing with?
So I suppose for my master's degree that I did in Maynooth as well, what I focused on entirely was the kind of the late 19th and early 20th century interpretations of early Irish texts. So you kind of had this idea of sort of a Celtic revival, a Gaelic reinvention, let's say. And so you have the likes of like Lady Gregory and W.B. Yeats and like these big, prolific Irish writers, and they were what you would now say in 2020, they were producing content that was to do with early Irish literature. So you have these figures like Cuchulainn, and they're popping up again in Irish literature by these famous writers. But they had kind of been changed and they've been altered in some ways drastically and dramatically, but in other ways staying the exact same.
Right. So those parts that were changed, was it a sort of a conscious decision to make changes to the mythologies? Or was it just sort of like the natural attrition on those stories that being brought into a more modern context had caused?
That's literally what I wrote my thesis on. And I don't think you meant to ask that question.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's what I researched and that's what I did, and I kind of focused on W.B. Yeats and his rendition of The Only Jealousy of Eimear. Didn't mean to write about Eimear. Turns out I just think she's class. Kind of glad now that my mum named me what she did. But so I looked at how what I believe he kind of innocently changed. Not that there was much innocent about him, but I don't think he understood what he was doing to the characters that he was writing. I don't think he was able to understand what he was reading from source material. Not that he was reading from source material. Like, there was no way Yeats was out here digging out manuscripts, reading early Irish and translating it back himself.
Are we getting like sort of a photocopier effect?
We're getting kind of Chinese whispers.
So he's repeating a story that's been repeated. It's not from like the Ulster Chronicles or anything like that.
No, exactly. So obviously he had a really good working relationship with Lady Gregory, who had published in English translations of all these texts that he was using. So he was working from the English language, and then he was putting his own poetic spin on things.
That's always where we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite interested what it was that first interested you in studying medieval literature, Irish mythology.
Right. I fell into it by complete fluke.
Right, okay.
Total accident.
You know how people often find themselves accidentally researching medieval literature? That age-old story. You
just wake up one morning and suddenly you're looking at 7th century Irish language and you're like, oh yeah, that's fine, yeah.
It's that song, isn't it? It's like, you know, you wake up, that's not my beautiful house, that's not my beautiful wife, that's my unexpected MA in medieval Irish literature. Pretty
much, yeah, that's it. What happened was I had really wanted to do Spanish in university. So in Ireland, you have to do your leaving cert and then you go on to university. And for my leaving cert, I had done Spanish and I had worked in Spain. I had taught English and the whole lot. It was what I wanted to do in university. So that was fine. And I was looking at like these different universities and, you know, what second subject do they let you pick for your arts degree? And there was one, and I was looking at maybe doing like Japanese and English teaching. And then I was thinking, it was literally the night before the applications closed. And I was like, no, what if I don't want to do that? And I like flicked open the prospectus for Maynooth. And I was like, oh my God, what do they let you take with Spanish? And next thing, there was Medieval Irish and Celtic Studies. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool. I'm going to do that. And then I ended up going to university, not really enjoying taking Spanish at a university level, and ended up loving the Celtic Studies.
That's brilliant. In a way, actually, that's quite a nice thing that they make you take those two sort of subjects. It kind of broadens your eyes. And I always thought, when we got to university, you were being narrowed down a little bit too harshly. You say that you took a course of archaeology in there as well. What do you remember what it was that you studied at that time?
It was literally just Introduction to Archaeology 101. It was like the first module that you take in your first semester of first year. And I remember it was all about Hallstatt and Latin and Celtic civilizations.
Oh, that's interesting. Did you actually get to do any excavations?
No, we didn't.
Oh.
I know.
They tease you that. They get you on the hook and then they're like, maybe you'll get to dig if you come back again.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind. But when I was doing my master's, then my best friend was doing the same master's, and he ended up getting just a couple of hours a week archaeology work just to tie him through cash-wise, and I was working in hotels. So we were both working in Dublin, and one evening we both finished work at the same time. We were like, do you want to go for a pint? We're like, yeah, go on. And we were both just new into these jobs, and I was still in my work uniform, so it was like a tailored dress, and you got like company pearls, and you wear heels, and your hair was done, your makeup was done. It was very glamorous because it's quite a posh hotel. And he turned up in like Snickers pants covered in shit and work boots. And he looked at me and he was like, Eimear, yeah, like the job is really cool. You'd love it. Like you should take it up. And I just looked at him and went, no. Like I'm absolutely not doing that.
Yeah, no, it's a hard argument to make.
Yeah, it didn't sell itself to me at all. So I loved the literature side of things and the language side of things instead. So that's what I ended up sticking with. And then I got into the job market, and now I work for a multinational tech company.
Yeah. Can a language like the Irish language survive separate to its cultural history?
I would think so.
How is it able to survive that disassociation?
I mean, I think there's it's weighted the numbers of people learning Irish and continuing with the Irish language because of its cultural history versus the amount of people who are picking it up because they think it's a cool language or whatever. I think there's far fewer people picking it up because, oh, that's kind of cool, versus people who are actively learning, I will say, because of their cultural heritage. Now, obviously, look, there are Gaelic areas in Ireland. There are people who will speak Irish all day, every day. I'm not talking about these native language speakers. I'm talking about people who will pick up a book one day at the age of, I don't know, 17 or 70.
Yeah.
Who want to learn it later in life. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so sort of almost hobbyist elements of it.
Exactly, yeah. So I think obviously with Irish and with Scots Gaelic coming up on Duolingo, you know, those courses are very good and they're opening it up to a much wider audience worldwide. I think that's definitely going to help in sort of the resurgence of the Irish language. But day to day, the likes of, you know, people like myself who don't live in a Gaelic area, who don't get to use their Irish every day, people who would go back to learning it will do so more for kind of cultural reasons.
I see. That's interesting. Within, and please feel free to, you know, if you can't answer this, but I'm interested with, you say the sort of the resurgence and interest in the Irish language. Mm-hmm. Was there a comparable interest in archaeology, mythology, and those other elements of it? And was it sort of, how much was it used as a way of creating an Irish national identity?
Yeah, so that was a big thing in kind of the late 19th, early 20th century with this this Gaelic revival. So the likes of W.B. Yeats and Lady Gregory, looking back at these great mythological figures, like the likes of Cuchulainn, he was the great Irish hero as such, like, and I think it kind of came into the political scene in Ireland as well. So Ireland was separating itself from the UK. a long history there. Don't have time to go into it in one podcast. So Ireland was gaining its
Really,
independence.
you surprised me.
Don't think we're going to fit 800 years into an hour. Like, sorry, I'm not that good. So
we've got half an hour. Let's do this.
okay.
Come on.
Brits bad, Irish good. Job done.
How much of modern Irish identity is defined by opposition to Englishness?
A lot of it. Yeah,
really?
A lot of it. Anyway.
Well, no, it's quite an interesting thing because obviously there's this, there's the language and the sort of the cultural history that comes with it, and the archaeology of the area. That's about building an identity of your of a people, and that's how I've always seen archaeology is helping build a sort of a shared cultural identity. But is there a big element of it that it's identifying as not the colonials?
Yes. To sum it up, yes. I mean, there was still, like, you still have 12th of July marches going on in the north with Unionists. So there still is that element of people living on the island of Ireland who associate themselves with being a member of the UK, if that's even the right term that I'm using. They're considering themselves as being British.
So does this mean that where you're working, as someone who's interpreting historical data, there's a danger of having an exclusionary element for people within the community you're working in?
How do you mean?
If it is a sort of an active tool of national identity, are there some people who will not necessarily... Have you ever come across people who don't agree with your interpretations of the historical information?
No. Like, I don't...
No, that's interesting.
I don't just throw my own opinions out there too much.
I don't hang with them.
For that specific reason, because there is a very high chance that I could be wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Do you enjoy talking to people about mythology?
I do. I enjoy it. And I think people enjoy hearing about it too, because you kind of, on the school curriculum in Ireland, the whole idea of, early Irish history and the beginnings of the Irish language, it's not taught at all. So you kind of get, for the first 1 or 2 years that you're in school and you're 4 and 5 and, you're playing with Lego and colouring and that's all you get to do all day. You kind of, at that stage, while the teachers are kind of humouring you a bit, they'll tell you these stories, but it never comes into the curriculum at any stage, really. Well, at least it didn't for me, Even when you get to do the Irish language, it's compulsory to do for the Leaving Cert unless you have an exemption. So even when it comes to that, you're dealing with like modern Irish writing. I think we had Oisin and Tiernan Og, but like that, it was a rendition of the text. We never got to engage with the early Irish language. We never got to engage with the huge corpus of early Irish material that is there. It was all very much modern Irish and modern Irish based. So I think because people don't get it forced upon them, which is what people love to say about the Irish language in the secondary schools in Ireland. It was forced down our throats. Because they don't get that kind of mythology and early Irish material like shoved down there really well. They don't know too much about it if they don't actively seek it out. So I think people then love to sit down and listen to stories, and kind of the oral tradition in Ireland is very strong, and it always has been. We've been a nation of storytellers. So I think that still is very prominent today when people want to hear these stories. And a lot of the messages that we get on the Motherfocloir podcast are, tell us more stories, tell us more stories. And someone actually wrote in and they were like, Eimear, can you get your mom to tell a story? And I'm like, I am not getting my mom to come on the podcast and tell a story.
But no, I've enjoyed some of the recent ones, the Skellig list and things like that. I thought, little tidbits of history.
Yes.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really fun. But what do you think the benefits are of learning mythologies then?
I mean, it's a whole cultural identity and it's a whole cultural history. I mean, if a lot of the mythology that still survives, it physically exists within the landscape of our country, like where I am in Killarney, we're down the very south of Ireland, and I live just next to a lake called Loch Lane. And just there, when I mentioned Oisin and Tiernan Og, that story is actually set on that lake. So
Right.
you have a lot of places that are associated with these texts. So even when it comes to, like the Hill of Tara is probably the most famous place, a second maybe to Newgrange. These are all places that are mentioned in the literature. It's not something that's written a million miles away. Like, it's here, and allegedly these things happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's great to sort of identify with your culture. And I mean, you don't have to be, like through and through Irish and freckles and ginger hair and live in a Gaelic area. Like, we have a huge population in Ireland of people who have moved here from abroad. We have huge Polish communities, we have Lithuanian communities, we've got all of these people that are moving to Ireland, and it's not a million miles away for them then to learn about, these places through stories and whatever else, because it's right there. It's not difficult for them to engage with this idea of a cultural identity when you're reading a story and it's like, oh, that's set down the road. That's right here.
What do you think takes precedence in a society's cultural identity? The archaeological evidence of the culture of the sort of the geographical place, or the stories of the community?
Okay. My archaeology lecturer from first year once scoffed at the idea of literature because archaeology was physical, so you know that it was there and you know that it existed. And now, he scoffed in jest, obviously, Jesus. He wasn't just disregarding an entire corpus of early Irish literature because it was written down.
Oh, you wrote it, did you? Jog on.
Piss off, not about that.
Yeah. Wait, you dug the book up? I'm listening.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas these manuscripts are physical archaeological evidence. What's written in them might be completely off the wall, I mean, what's written in them could be talking about Cuchulain's Riastrid, where he was so angry that he physically changed, like one eye shot into the back of his head and one eye ended up the size of a plate, and like these nuts things happening, like that could not physically or biologically happen to a person from just being pissed off, but the existence of this manuscript and these physical written words are an archaeological link to our past. There is that physical element of our oral and written tradition there in the ground, dug up.
One of the things that I came across when I was doing research is the sort of almost visceral loathing for the term Celtic mythology. Why is that?
So, kind of a Celtic civilization is one from mainland Europe. It's from the Hallstatt and the Ten areas. And you don't actually see a mass Celtic inward migration or invasion in Ireland. Like that, there's no real hard archaeological evidence to say that, these Celtic people, these Celts, took over the entire country. Yes, there is some material that's there, but they could be from trade links, they could be from a small settlement or whatever else. Whereas that term Celtic, while yes, you can have Celtic languages, and Irish does fall in under that, there was no real Celtic people in Ireland. We are a Gaelic people, you know.
So it's basically an inaccurate term.
Pretty much, yeah.
That would explain why people were not into it.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So I always tend to stress that it's, you know, Irish material, or that it's Gaelga instead of Gaelic, because we would consider Gaelic to be Scots Gaelic being the language, whereas Gaelga being the Irish term for the Irish language.
Gaelga.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah.
Come on.
You'll get there.
Oh, I can promise you I will not.
A few hours in Duolingo and you'll be fine.
I'm glad to see that you are pushing that beautifully.
I am repping the Duolingo.
Strong work.
Yeah.
Actually, talking about online assets and things like that, you've done the podcasts recorded, interviews and things like that, but you've also had, I would say, the joy of doing it in front of live audiences.
Yes.
What do you think is the best way of imparting information, historical information, or are there different advantages from a recorded and a live setting?
I hands down prefer a live setting any day of the week, because you and I can sit here and we can have a conversation and we can talk all we want about whatever. And this podcast can be released, and if 1 million people listen to it, 999,000 of those people can think, oh, that was shit, wasn't it? Whereas you and I will think, oh, that was a great podcast. Whereas if you're sitting in a room full of people, you can see how they engage with the material, and you can see kind of what draws attention and what doesn't, and you can kind of, you can open the floor to questions and you can have that interaction there. So not only does it's good branding, so it it kind of opens up the idea of the Motherfocloir podcast being kind of personal and approachable, but it also helps us, oh my god, I sound like such an but it helps us improve our content. Because we know what people like.
You know what the audience is. Yeah, you know what the audience is asking. And on that, what kind of questions do you get? Is there any themes that regularly come through?
Generally, any of the feedback that we get is all to do with mythology. And people go absolutely stone mad for the mythology that we do. Yeah. Even any of the episodes that we've recorded, if you go back, some of our, most popular ones have all been to do with mythology. And I'm like, we didn't actually start out to be a podcast on mythology. We started out to talk about the Irish language. And suddenly people were like, oh my god, give us more mythology, we need it. And we're like, all right, okay, there you go, take it all. We have no more left to give.
We've just started making stuff up at this point.
We don't know.
A fella called Phil stole a cow.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, people just love it. And I think it's because it's not an essential part of the school curriculum that people are like, oh my god, I don't know about this and I want to know more about it.
I think similarly, I've come up against people who don't know much about English mythologies as well, because we have so little of it. But things like river hags and stuff like that, it's just an unknown aspect of, our schooling at primary school. You get taught about the Romans and maybe a little bit of World War II. I don't know if you know, but there was this war.
Was it the first one or the second one?
Both of them. We bang on about both of them, but that seems to be those are the main parts of it, and the mythological is missing. Yeah,
it's kind of. I don't think people understand how important it is to look at mythology to understand a society.
What can you tell from a mythology that you couldn't from a history?
That you couldn't from a history? What I like about mythology is that, well, especially, well, I'm not sure about, the English mythology, but when it comes to Irish mythology, you get a lot of kind of the legal texts and societal roles and understandings worked into these mythological tales. So you get a lot of this idea of female speech worked into the mythology that you might not grasp as much of it from reading legal texts or whatever. And legal texts could be boring, No one's going to want to sit down in the evenings and think, oh, do you know what I love now? Some legal texts, do you know?
I think, gather round, children. We're reading the 1994 Criminal Acts Bill.
Exactly. Whereas when you see it in action almost in these mythological texts, you're like, oh, that's how that worked. That's how it would have gone down back in the day, Eimear is obviously, she's my gal. We're good pals. I like her a lot. And you get to look at how female speech could be used rather in society way back yonder. And this idea of poetic verse being worked into literary texts to denote how important her speech was. And then that kind of has a knock-on effect in showing you how important poetry was in an early Irish setting, and how poetry had a knock-on effect into the legal texts and everything else. So it's kind of one snowballs into the other. And that's kind of how, one text can tell you nearly everything you need to know about a society.
I've got a couple more questions, but I also just seen a sleeping baby arrive outside our flat window, which means that we're coming to a close because he gets precedence in the house.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I want to ask just a couple more questions. Number one, with regard to the podcast, what the heck happened with episode 82?
What was episode 82? I feel like that was our live one, was it? Was it our live one in Maynooth?
It was a Google Translate.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the one you never want your parents to listen to.
No. I was trying to listen along to that, and there was a point where you asked, we should see if there's anyone in the audience who isn't, an Irish language speaker. And that was the point I was going, yes! Because I was lost. Yeah. But every now and again, I think my favourite term, and I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, but my favourite term was he was dealing with a difficult rooster.
Yeah.
So do you want to, how did your audience respond to that particular episode?
I mean, like that, we aimed it at the audience we knew we were going to have. It was Seachtain na Gaeilge, so we knew that it was going to be the sort of the Irish studiers in Maynooth that were going to be there. So everyone there was going to have at least some sort of a grasp of the Irish language. I'm not sure who found the text in question that we were reading, but I know that I had to pay 99 cents for it.
Yeah. And how is your Google search history now?
I know. I was so afraid because I don't use audiobooks, so I was so scared that I was going to get a receipt for it posted to my home address. Because I use my mom's address as my shipping address for everything, because I know that it's always just going to land in the porch and that's that, whatever I get shipped. So I was like, oh my God, what if she gets this receipt and she opens it, she sees what I've been reading.
What I enjoy for our conversation is that neither of us said what that text is, and do you know what? Neither of us are. If you do want to find it out, I do recommend listening to episode 82. It is, even for a monoglot like myself, really fun.
Yeah. Oh wow, that was an episode and a half.
It really was. Okay, last two questions. Number one, a sight dog or a sight cat?
You can't ask me that.
Yes, I can, and I have.
I'm going to say dog. Dogs are definitely a lot more loyal. Yeah.
All right, we'll go with that. And the last question. You sort of work in the heritage industry, but how would you like to be remembered?
As the only person who could use Gossip Girl as a template for early Irish storytelling. Or maybe the first person to relate Gossip Girl and early Irish storytelling. Yeah.
Perfect. I like how it changed to first. Like, you're going to suddenly get a lot of followers.
Maybe someone else might do it and take claim for it, but I did it first.
Well, this is the document of you doing it. Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to plug at the end?
Just the Motherfocloir podcast. Season 3 will be coming at some point in time. We're a bit delayed with this whole global viral pandemic thing that no one's really having fun with. But it will be coming soon. Fingers crossed. If not, everything that's already been recorded and released is already up on Spotify. It's already up wherever anybody can get their podcasts. So please listen to us and maybe follow us all on Twitter if you want early Irish content crossed with Paris Hilton.
It's pretty strong.
Yeah. Who else is going to do it?
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
Right, okay. Thank you so much. Say hello to the small baby.
I will. You've been listening to the Ask an Archaeologist podcast with me, Paul Duncan McGarrity. The music you were listening to was by From the Ashes. Check them out on Bandcamp. It was produced by me, Paul Duncan McGarrity. You can follow me on Twitter at askanarch, or you can send an email at askanarch@gmail.com. But most importantly, if you've enjoyed yourself and you think you have a friend who might be interested in the podcast, please tell them about it. Write a review, put up a star rating, let people know that we're here. It's incredibly helpful and much appreciated. Once again, thank you to everyone who has asked an art. Bye-bye.